Audiobook narrator Mike Scott. When selecting your next audiobook, choose from some of the great titles narrated by audiobook narrator Mike Scott, like Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864. And if you're an author or publisher interested in having your written works produced as audiobooks, give Mike a shout at MikeScottVoice.com. Mike Scott, the voice of history. And Civil War Trails. It's the world's largest open-air museum, and they offer over 1,300 sites across 6 states. Drive the Gettysburg campaign turn by turn, paddle to Frederick Douglass's birthplace, or hike to remote earthworks and artillery positions. Visit civilwartrails.org to request a brochure and explore their interactive map. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, people on Facebook. Welcome to Addressing Gettysburg. Today, we are talking about Confederate artillery here at Gettysburg. And we have a new guide with us, Rob Abbott, who, welcome, Rob.
Thank you.
He's not new as a guide. He's new to the show. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Make sure that you have your notifications turned on. Also, if you use the Apple Podcast app, please leave a 5-star review. Reviews, liking, sharing, and subscribing are the best way to help us grow our audience, and we appreciate you doing it. So, Rob, why don't we start, since this is your first time? Let's start with a little biography as to who you are.
Biography, I am a retired United States Marine. I'm from Maryland, did 25 years in the Marine Corps. Worked as a defense contractor for about 7 years. Took the guide test in 2012 and got licensed in 2014. So I've been a guide for about 7 years.
Okay, nice. And what would be your favorite aspect of the battle be? Do you have one?
Favorite aspect of the battle is that they're people just like us.
Yeah, okay.
I think that the problems that they have back then are the exact same problems that we have today.
Yeah.
It's all about personal relationships. It's all about trust. It's all about clear communications.
Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. I like it. That's a good answer. So we're talking about Confederate artillery. Now, you're doing one of the Tuesday battle walks that the guides do, right?
Correct.
When is this going to be?
Well, I'm doing a Tuesday walk here on June 8th, which is Texas, the Texas Brigade.
Right.
But this podcast is an advertisement for the 22 September.
September, okay.
And it's going to be a Sunday afternoon. It'll be 2 to 5 on a Sunday afternoon on 22 September. And this is going to be Confederate Artillery Leadership for 3 hours.
Confederate Artillery Leadership. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Lewis Trott and I and Eric for a bit got to go around with you as you were kind of practicing the tour, and it was very, very interesting. So anybody that, and I'm sure you probably tweaked it a bit from then, haven't you?
Cleaned it up. That's the whole idea. Yeah.
Yeah. But it didn't need a lot of cleaning as far as I was concerned. I thought it was really good, very informative. And so anybody out there that's listening to this, if you get a chance to go on the 22nd of September, make sure that you do, because it will be eye-opening, I think is a good way. Because, it
was for me. I mean, when I put the tour together, I came into it with certain an appreciation, understanding of what I thought I was going to find, and when I was done, I had a different appreciation for Confederate artillery.
Good. Okay, cool. So why don't we start with a little bit of a background, and then we'll take our break. But give us a background on the Confederate artillery and all that jazz.
Okay. The primary reference that we're going to use here is called the Long Arm of Lee. It's right there. Can they see it? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's written by a guy named Jennings Cropper Wise, and it comes out in the early 1900s. And Wise is he'd been at VMI, he'd served in the Army, been wounded, and he had the opportunity to actually sit down and interview a lot of these Confederate artillery leaders. So it gives you a pretty interesting perspective on soup to nuts, start to finish, where Confederate artillery is at the beginning of the war and where it is by the end of the war. So that's probably the primary reference that I used. I picked it up in a used bookstore, and Loved it. Really good. You got to keep in mind that Wise is he's a lost cause guy.
Oh, okay.
And so that kind of colors some of his interpretation.
Okay.
But still, it was a fascinating perspective. So when we talk about Confederate artillery, everybody take a breath. I mean, everybody wants to come off the top rope and immediately give the atomic elbow slam to Pendleton and start immediately blaming Pendleton.
Mm-hmm.
But let's walk it backwards a bit.
Okay.
And let's go all the way to firing at Fort Sumter. What is the Confederate artillery arm at Sumter? Not much. We got some coastal guns that they've seized from U.S. arsenals. Okay, how long between Sumter and Manassas? Couple of months.
Yeah.
Couple of months. How long is it going to take you to create a credible artillery arm? A long time.
Sure.
Because, the United States military is starting with, 24,000 guys and all this weaponry and all this industry, and the Confederacy is starting with 0, maybe 400 cannon, half of which are siege guns or seacoast guns, and the other half are overage Mexican War vintage 6-pounders and things like that. There's this big myth that Floyd and Davis are siphoning all this weaponry to the South prior to the war. Yeah, they're doing that, but it's all old stuff. It's all stuff that you can't use on the battlefield. So
impractical stuff.
Quite
okay.
impractical. So they've suddenly got to go from 0. I think the Confederacy owns about 400 cannon at the beginning of the war.
Okay. And that has to be spread out all over the place.
Not only all over the place, not only Army of Northern Virginia, Army of Tennessee, Army of Mississippi, Texas, militias, seacoast guns. But it's going to take time.
Sure.
And to create that artillery, I'm going to need someone to create the barrels. And that's not easy.
Right.
I can't just take some simple shop down the street and turn it into a
cannon foundry.
Yeah, a cannon foundry. I just don't do that overnight.
Right.
I just can't convert it overnight. And then the carriages that these cannon go on. I think we talked about when we walked around that people don't appreciate the engineering marvel that an artillery carriage is.
The balanced.
The balance.
Yeah.
That you can use this thing in combat. The barrel weighs 1,200 pounds for a smooth bore. The carriage weighs 3,200 pounds. And you're moving it around with a stick.
Right.
And
it's amazing.
And you've got this little screw to change the elevation, and the thing's not tipping over all the time because you're dragging it on bad roads with 6 horses or 8 horses or whatever. So to make the barrels, to make the carriages, think of all the metal that's hanging off a gun. All the pins, the straps, the tubes, the plates, all the handles. That stuff's got to come from someplace. I need wood to create the carriages. I need horses. I need lots and lots of horses. For a 4-gun Confederate battery, you need 70 horses. And I'm not talking about little ponies. I'm talking about big, strong, healthy horses that can actually pull a 2-ton cannon through a wet farmer's field. And then I need carriages. I need the limbers and the caissons and the mobile forges with like a mobile blacksmith shop. And I need anvils and coal. And
so for people that are new to all of this stuff, go through what are caissons, what are limbers.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
So
no, that's okay.
So with a cannon, you've got the traditional cannon, and you got 9 guys. And then you've got a limber, which is a 2-wheeled cart pulled by 6 horses, and it's got 1 ammunition box, and its job is to tow the cannon. That's its sole job. And then you've got something called a caisson, which is kind of articulated. It's 4 wheels. It's got 3 ammunition boxes and 6 horses and a spare wheel and a bunch of tools.
So this is separate from
The gun.
the gun and the limber.
Yeah, but it's a team. I need a gun. I need the limber. I need the caisson.
So one gun has 2 teams of horses, or is this all strung together?
One gun has 2 teams of horses.
Right. Okay.
If they're properly made.
And a team is 6?
6
So 12 horses for a gun.
at a minimum. Yeah.
Okay.
Assuming your horses are healthy.
Right. Assuming you could find them.
Yeah. And the Union, they've got a rail line to Westminster. We got all the oats and grains we need.
Yeah.
But if I'm a Confederate, I'm not getting any oats and grains. I'm not a horse guy, but horse people tell me that if you want a horse to do work, you have to. If you want a horse to stay alive, it can just eat grass. But if you want a horse to actually do work, you need to feed it.
Right.
So
because they need fodder for digestion, and they got to have the food for the nutrients,
and they need all that water.
Yep.
So I need the horses, and then besides the guns and the limbers and the caissons, you got a whole nother line of wagons. You have a mobile forge, which is like a mobile blacksmith shop, because this stuff is breaking all the time, and we need the ability to fix it in the field on the fly, because they're in the field all the time. And then you have a battery wagon, which has all the supplies, and then Confederates will have forage wagons because they're having to cut their own forage. The Union guns will end up having their own ambulance attached. So
now does each gun get its own forge, or is that a battery thing?
It's a battery resource. It's one forge per battery.
Per battery, okay.
And a lot of work.
Yeah.
This stuff breaks all the time.
Yeah.
Because you're jamming it down rocky, uneven roads. The force of the recoil is breaking the carriages, is breaking the metal supports.
Maybe it's hit by projectiles or something.
And it's not just that, but you use the forge to shoe your horses.
Yeah.
And the horses are the horses are down south on dirt roads. It's not that big of a deal, but they're up north on paved roads, which is crushed rock.
Right, macadamized.
And the crushed rock is very hard on the horses' hooves, and the horses are throwing shoes. So you got to have these forges to replace the shoes on your horses so the horses don't go lame.
Sounds like quite an undertaking.
Quite an undertaking.
So how do they, from Fort Sumter to Manassas, just that period there,
right?
How do they organize the artillery? Like, say, at the Battle of Manassas, how is the field artillery organized with that army?
I'll answer that question, but I'm not done yet.
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead.
So, tools, horses, harnesses, horseshoes, horseshoe nails, ammunition, ammo boxes, fuses, all the finer of the sights for the artillery, all that stuff has to be manufactured from scratch,
right,
in a couple of months. So what do you get at Manassas? You get an odd mix of outdated cannon. I mean, if you've been to Manassas and walked around the battlefield, you see a bunch of 6-pounders, with small guns, really small guns on the Confederate gun line. So, and they're doing the best they can because they've only been at this job for about 4 months. So who is the guy that does all this? Who is the guy that takes all of that stuff, figures out where to get it manufactured, gets the specifications, gets it in production, gets the government contracting written? It's Pendleton. Pendleton is an Episcopal minister. He's a preacher. And he had been an artillery guy back when he was a lieutenant, West Point guy. So he basically goes around preaching, hey, I need all this stuff for the Confederate war effort. And it works.
Okay.
He gets it. I mean, he is the guy that brings this all together. So now there's one other character that I feel compelled to mention. His name is Josiah Gorgas. And Gorgas is the Lazare Carnot of the Confederacy. I don't know if a lot of your folks will get that reference, but long before I was a Civil War geek, I was a Napoleonic geek.
Okay.
And Lazare Carnot is the guy who basically is the organizer of victory. He's the guy that turns the French economy onto a wild war footing to accommodate Napoleon.
Okay.
And he's the guy that converts all of the factories, sets up gunpowder production, collects the metal to create the cannons, to create all the weapons to help with levée en masse. Well, Gorgas is kind of that guy for the Confederacy. Because, I mean, we all say all the time that the Union has 90% of the industry and Confederacy has 10. So, okay, so what does that mean? They got 4 factories, really. They got Tredegar and like 3 factories in Georgia.
Okay.
But what a lot of people lose sight of is, oh, well, that'll work. No, it won't, because Gorgas is not just providing guns for the Army of Northern Virginia. He's providing for guns for Tennessee,
right,
and the Mississippi and Texas and the fortresses and the militia and everybody else. So, and the Navy. So everybody comes to Tredegar and says, hey, I need metal plate for ironclads. Hey, I need swords. I need rifles. I need all this kind of stuff. Yet they don't give Tredegar enough supplies. They don't give them enough raw materials, nor do they give them enough manpower, because they keep taking the manpower and sticking them in the infantry.
So how the hell is he supposed to do this?
Well, that's why it's a miracle.
Okay.
I mean, that's, we go into this thinking, oh, well, they're all screwed up. But then once you walk it backwards and you look at it from the beginning, you realize, holy cow, look at what they accomplished in the very short period of time, given what little they had. And as dysfunctional as a lot of government organizations can be, that they managed to field a fairly credible artillery force that would beat the Yankees at First Bull Run. So I'm impressed. I was impressed.
Sure,
I was impressed.
No, it is impressive. I always say the more I learn about the odds that they had against them, the more impressed I am with them that it went on for 4 years. So
when you look at this guy Pendleton, and come on the tour, we'll go into a deep biographical dive on Pendleton. But in the military, we talk about capability development. And one of the things they talk about is DOTMIL-PF, which is an acronym that the military uses for capability development. It stands for Doctrine, Organization, Training, Material, Personnel, and Facilities, and Leadership. Okay? So when you analyze creating a capability, you use that format. So let's very quickly go through what Pendleton has on his plate. So first thing is, what doctrine am I going to use? Am I using English doctrine? Am I using French doctrine? Am I using Yankee doctrine? So, somebody's got to pick what we're going to use. What playbook are we operating out of?
Yeah.
And then you got to figure out, what are the organizations going to look like? Is everybody going to get to do their own thing? Are we going to standardize these things? Do we let anybody raise any type of unit with any type of gun, with any type of numbers of people? Or are we going to standardize this? So the Confederacy basically falls into a 4-gun battery system, and we see that quite a bit. Is it standard? No. I mean, there's all kind of different configurations, even here at Gettysburg. Training. How are we going to train these guys? Do you think any of these people have ever fired a cannon before?
In the backyard all the time.
Yeah. They grew up shooting
cannons. So it's going to take time to train these guys. And in order to train them properly, you need to do live fire. But in order to do live fire, I need gunpowder.
Yeah.
And if I don't have enough gunpowder to fight the battle, am I really going to have enough gunpowder to do training?
Right.
So this is a constant problem for everybody. And so a lot of these guys don't really get a chance to practice with live fire. It's all kind of dumb show just going through the numbers. So material, bringing all that stuff together. And just because you bring it all together doesn't mean you're done, because these 18-year-olds, they lose this stuff on a fairly cyclic basis.
Sure.
I mean, Marines today aren't any different. They lose the tools and the gear and the equipment all the time. When you train people, they lose stuff because they operate at night. Stuff falls off the wagon. So not only do I have to issue it to them for the first time, but I'm going to have to keep issuing it to them over and over again because it's going to get destroyed in battle. So personnel, where am I getting the people from? I mean, am I getting it from the infantry? Am I recruiting them to be in the artillery? Everybody thinks you have to be a math guy, a mathematics guy to be an artilleryman. Not really. To be a siege guy, you'd kind of need math, but this is all Kentucky windage out here. They're mainly getting horse guys. They get people out here that understand horses is who we want in the artillery.
Interesting.
And then the facilities, like the depots. We're going to create the depots. Where are we going to bring all this material and hold it and prioritize the issuing of it out to different places? Where are we going to stockpile the ammunition? How are we going to transport the ammunition? You don't just load a bunch of fuses in the back of a wagon, because they're going to blow up.
Right.
So, they have to be specially packed. The ammunition has to be very carefully packed. And then leadership. Who are we going to pick to run these things? Is it going to be the guy that recruits it? Sometimes. But sometimes the popular guy isn't necessarily the guy you want. So just because he's popular and he's energetic and he can recruit a battery doesn't necessarily make him a good artilleryman.
Right.
And I don't think anybody knows what a good artilleryman looks like back then. Unless you're a West Point guy and you fired a cannon a couple times, you really don't know.
Yeah, very few must know that, yeah.
Yeah, very few know that. And they're learning it on the job. So this is what Pendleton has to do. And the sheer fact that he brings, 272 guns and 7,000 men to Gettysburg, I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Okay.
Getting there is half the battle.
Right.
Because if you can't get your people there, it doesn't make any difference what happens on the battlefield. So you can love or hate Pendleton, but you got to give him credit for getting the people to Gettysburg.
Explain, when you say love or hate, that's obviously a loaded statement there. So why do people love him? Why do people hate him?
Well, I don't know that anybody loves him. But he very quickly becomes a scapegoat for everything that happens at Gettysburg. Everybody is automatically going to blame Pendleton for everything that goes wrong here. And
why? Why are they going to blame him?
I guess they feel that he doesn't exert leadership. Do you believe that Confederate artillery fails at Gettysburg? I don't know. Do you? General Lee says in his after-action report that the artillery failed to have the ammunition to drive the Yankees off of Cemetery Ridge. So he's implying that that's why Pickett's charge failed. Well, whose fault's that?
Yeah, I was going to say, is that really an artillery branch issue or is that an ordnance department issue?
Well, wouldn't the artillery branch request what they need from the ordnance branch?
Yeah, but
sure. And Richmond has an unlimited box of ammunition.
Well, what I'm saying, but he's got to make it's the artillery's responsibility at the end of the day to have what they need. No.
Well,
you're the military guys, not me.
You're doing the best you can.
Yeah.
You're submitting your requests.
They still deal with.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
They're still at the mercy of vendors and approvals and supply chain, and you can't imagine there's a refined, mature supply chain operation from Richmond to the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania at that point because they weren't even.
No, there isn't. Yeah.
What's going on in Tennessee? Tullahoma campaign. What's going on in Vicksburg? Vicksburg.
Yeah.
What's on the Mississippi? They're fighting all over the Confederacy.
And Rob, who are the suppliers? You said they're spinning up this massive thing in the beginning of the war. What currency are they using? Are they Are they using theirs? Are they using United States dollar
Gold.
reserves? Is it gold and silver?
Well,
Who's actually
when
doing
the war
work with
breaks
them?
out, the Confederacy writes big checks to European nations,
Okay, so you're okay.
mainly England and Austria, I think, just based on my research. And because if you look closely, you'll see some Austrian guns here at Gettysburg,
Yep.
and you clearly see some English guns here, and because they just don't know what they don't know, and they're just reaching out to people that have done this before and trying to get their hands on whatever they can. So, but the Confederacy, you can capture Yankee guns, but what you rarely can do is capture Yankee ammunition. So you got to make your own ammunition, and I'll get hate mail for this, but the Confederacy doesn't do a good job of making their own ammunition. Their ammunition tends to be fairly poor.
I don't know why you would get hate mail for that. It's true.
Yeah, but
Everybody knows it.
so, but they just don't do a good job of making their own ammunition. And we all know about the problem with the fuses.
Yeah.
So I got worn out guns, and I got worn out horses, and I got bad ammunition, and I got bad fuses.
Yeah, it's amazing that they got any guns to fire. You know.
So, okay, so let's back this up to let's talk about leadership for a second. So two things that the Confederacy does have going for them is there are pre-war militia units, and normally militia units are social organizations. It's a reason to put on a fancy uniform and drink heavily. And in theory, we're going to fight Indians, or we're going to put down a whiskey rebellion, or we're going to do something like that. Well, the Confederacy actually has 2 artillery militia units. And the oldest and the most well-known is the Washington Artillery out of New Orleans.
Yeah.
And they can trace their lineage all the way back to like 1708 or something like that.
Wow.
I mean, they've been around for a long time, long time. Why? Because Louisiana is a mercantile town, and they got to deal with pirates. So I got to put cannon on merchant ships, and perhaps I should train with these cannons sometime prior to needing to use them.
Yeah.
So these guys have been around for a long time. So you've had guys practicing with cannon for like their whole life. And you got a guy named Walton, who is the head of the artillery, and come out on the 22nd. We'll talk about him and his relationship with Pendleton. But the other organization is the Richmond Howitzers. Now, Richmond Howitzers created in 1859, and they're howitzers. They're siege guns, but you see howitzers on the battlefield here because these siege guns are being used in a direct fire mode. So both of these militia organizations end up spawning 3 to 4 individual artillery batteries. And these guys kind of become the best and brightest of the Confederate artillerymen. Why? Because they've done it before. So, and if you peel back some of the senior leadership, you'll trace it back to Washington Artillery, or you'll trace it back to the Richmond Howitzers. Because unless you've done it at West Point, that's going to be the next best thing.
Interesting. So, okay, can you answer the question now about
Sure. Ask me the question.
Bull Run? I forgot the question. Between Fort Sumter and Bull Run,
Yeah.
how were they able, or how did they have the field artillery organized in the Confederate Army at the Battle of Bull Run? Was it similar to the way it would be here, or totally different? Was it?
It's on an infinitely smaller scale. And smaller scale, smaller batteries. Frequently have batteries with like 2 guns in them.
Okay.
And these are really small guns, 6-pounders, something that you're not even really seeing. There's like 1 6-pounder at Gettysburg.
Yeah.
So,
are they attached to brigades, or how are they?
I see where you're going.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you're going to cut me off if we're getting into the question period. So, you got to think about what artillery was used for prior to the American Civil War. Prior to the American Civil War, there were no 12-pound Napoleons, really. There are no rifles. I mean, this 3-inch ordnance rifle, Parrots, they don't exist. So everything is a smoothbore. And the weapon of choice back then is a 12-pound howitzer. So it's a indirect fire weapon. You can use it in a direct fire mode. It's popular because it's light.
Okay.
It's relatively light, and it doesn't take as many horses to pull it. So when you're only talking about a handful of infantry, you only need a handful of cannon, and those cannon are attached directly to the infantry commander. Attached. So there's three command relationships for artillery. There's attached, direct support, and general support. Direct support means your battery is working directly for this guy. General support means your battery is helping everybody. And attached is you belong to him.
Okay.
I mean, lock, stock, and barrel. You belong to him. So pre-war, everything is attached. It belongs directly to the general. And if the general tells you to do something stupid, you got to do it. I mean, you don't really have a lot of options. You don't really have an artillery higher headquarters to go complain to. So that's pretty much what you're seeing.
So
and it's one battery per brigade.
Per brigade, okay.
Per brigade, basically.
So now, get us to Gettysburg. How is it looking different at Gettysburg?
Well, I know
it's a big jump.
It's going to progress because the big fight, the big thing that has an impact is the Peninsula Campaign. And one of the big issues that military guys do today is called terrain management. And what terrain management is only so much stuff can occupy so much space at any given time. It's just physics. I mean, so
makes sense.
And if I've got 4 cannon and 4 limbers and 70 horses and 4 caissons and 4 administrative wagons, it takes up a football field's worth of space.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm taking up that space, it means nobody else can take up that space. So before you put artillery in, somebody, an adult, has to go forward and look at the ground.
Right.
And decide, I'm going to put a battery here. And the ground has to be conducive, a football field's worth of open ground,
right,
that I can put this battery into position.
So you've said this twice now, but explain what that means, because this was fascinating to me on the tour that you did.
Well, the magic number is 14 yards. So you got a line of 4 guns, and then 14 yards back, you got the limbers with the ammunition box. And then 14 yards behind that is the line of caissons with the 3 ammunition boxes. And then 14 yards behind that is the line of the administrative wagons. Why 14 yards? Because it takes 14 yards to turn a team of horses. Okay? Because the horses always have to be facing the noise. You would think that the horses would be facing away so you could hook the guns up quickly, but no, you don't want to do that because the horses get spooked. So 14 plus 14 plus 14, it's a football field. It's like 86 yards.
And how many yards between a gun?
14.
And so 14 across and 14 back.
Yeah. If they're doing it doctrinally.
Right.
If they're doing it out of the West Point textbook, if they're doing it the way they're supposed to. Why do you want guns that far apart? Because I don't want sympathetic detonations.
Sure.
I mean, if an ammo box gets hit and it goes up, I don't want it to take all of them with it.
Right.
So, which causes a problem. It means the number 5 guy, on the crew, there's a guy with a leather bag. He's number 5, and his job is to take that shell. It's a shell and a wooden disc called a sabot and a powder bag and a fuse. It's all a package. It weighs 15 pounds, and he's going to put it into the bag, and he's going to have to shuttle it from the limber up to the gun, because you never, ever, 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 ever are supposed to store ammunition next to the gun.
Right.
Because you don't want it to blow up and kill the crew.
Makes sense.
Which you would think. But do both sides violate that on a regular basis? Yeah, of course they do.
Yeah.
Because they're 18.
Yeah. And they cut corners. That's what they like to do.
Because that's what they did. So it takes up a lot of space. So I need some adult to go forward and pick the spot that an infantry unit isn't already in. Now think about what the terrain looks like in the peninsula. Terrible.
Yeah, it's not wide open and flat.
It's all swamp.
Yeah.
So go find me a football field's worth of space on the peninsula. I can't. So the Confederacy has a hard time getting their batteries into action. And when they do get into action, they get the snot kicked out of them by the Yankees, because the Yankees are always on the defensive. Mm-hmm. And they're not going 14 yards. They're going hub to hub. And in a straight up fight between Confederate Union artillery, the Union artillery is probably going to win. So the Confederate artillery has a tough time on the peninsula.
Okay.
And after the Peninsula campaign's over with, and we get out into open field fighting like Second Bull Run and Antietam, Confederate artillery does much better. But they start figuring out, maybe we need to mass the guns. Maybe we need to make it easy to mass the guns. Let's group the batteries into battalions. Mm-hmm. So instead of a battery belonging to a brigade, now I've got 4 batteries of 4 guns each, 16 guns total, under the command of a brigade or a battalion commander. Union, they're called brigades. Confederacy, they're called battalions. So this is what you start to see post-Peninsula, is they start to group the batteries into these battalion formations.
Okay.
Got it?
Got it.
All right.
Okay. So, and the battalions are attached to...
Well, the battalions are going to be, by the time you get to Gettysburg, you've got 5 battalions in a corps. 1 battalion direct support to each one of the infantry divisions, and then 2 battalions in general support, which they would call reserves.
Right.
So,
okay. Now, does the Army at Gettysburg? Does the Army the Army of Northern Virginia? Do they have an Army Reserve of Artillery?
No.
Okay, so the reserves are at the corps level.
That's correct.
And then each division has its own battalion that they use on their front.
That's correct.
And that's under the command of, or the direction of, the division commander? Like he would say to the battalion commander, I need, or how would that go?
Well, you would think, and this gets to your first question.
Okay.
Okay, we're kind of edging into the first question, which is...
Okay, with Charles Fuller's question. Okay. All right, well then save it for the questions. Are you done with the background?
I'm done with the background.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll take Charles Fuller's question and everybody else's questions. If you're watching us live on Facebook and you have a question, put it in the comments if you haven't already, and Eric will put it on my list here, and I will get to them when we are done with our patrons' questions. In the meantime, we're going to go take a break once I can find my commercial break here for this. I got so many things in my bank that I can't even find things anymore. We'll be right back. The season is finally here. 2021 is going to be a great year, and we know that you're going to come down to Gettysburg. And when you do come down to Gettysburg, you got to take a tour with Getty's Bike Tours. Getty's Bike Tours has been in business since 2005. It is the best way to see the battlefield. Why? Because you don't just see the battlefield, you experience the battlefield. Our tours are led by some of the finest licensed battlefield guides out there, and they make sure that you walk away with a full understanding of what happened here on those 3 days in 1863. Here's the best part. Because you're an Addressing Gettysburg listener, you're going to get 15% off when you make your reservation. Now, this discount only applies to tours, so go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 and book a tour today. There's no better way to see the town you're visiting than to eat your way through it. And there's no better way to eat your way through this town than with Savor Gettysburg food tours. Enjoy a culinary and cultural experience through historic downtown Gettysburg, one delicious bite at a time. Their season runs from April through November with the special Christmas Tastes and Traditions walking food tour during the month of December. So go to SavorGettysburgFoodTours.com and enter promo code AG2021 to receive $5 off your tour. Eat, walk, get a taste of history with Savor Gettysburg. Have you noticed our revamped website at addressinggettysburg.com? Well, that's the fine work of a man named Mike Stretch, and he also redid our logo for us. Both of them I originally designed, and both of them were originally horrible. But now they're nice, and that's all thanks to Mike. Mike has an awesome t-shirt company called Heritage Depot. There you'll find great designs based on Gettysburg and the Civil War with t-shirts and other types of merchandise. So go to heritage-depot.com and spruce up your Gettys Nerd wardrobe. That's heritage-depot.com. Our favorite bookstore in Gettysburg is For the Historian, located at 42 York Street. Isn't it, Eric?
You're darn tootin', Matt.
It's because they have the best selection of Civil War books in Gettysburg, both new and used, and online they have even more books to choose from.
But Matthew, what if the Civil War is simply not my thing?
Not a problem, my fine four-fendered friend. This is For the Historian, after all. They cover history from the ancient world to the 21st century with a strong selection of World War II and American Revolution books.
It's astounding how they squeeze thousands of titles from Osprey, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more into their store.
And it's also astounding how you and I both squeeze into our pants every day. Well, handsome, they have a warehouse too, and that's where they keep all those books that are available online at forthehistorian.com. And folks, if you go to forthehistorian.com now and order books until you're blue in the face, be sure you mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund your shipping costs.
What if I prefer to browse in the store and don't want to go online to get my book?
Great question, Doodlebug. Just mention Addressing Gettysburg at checkout, and they'll take 20% off the retail price of your item. So go to forthehistorian.com, stop by 42 York Street, or call 717-685-5207. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207. Gettysburg, A Nation Divided mobile app is relaunching this summer. Gettysburg, A Nation Divided is an award-winning mixed reality mobile application using augmented reality technology. It transports users into the most crucial moments in the Battle of Gettysburg, the turning point of the Civil War. Users can listen and watch historic figures share their stories as lifelike animated avatars, traverse 360-degree image sequences of the battlefield. Its cinematic battle sequences are narrated by actor Scott Eastwood. The mobile app is available for free on iOS and Android. It's designed to be used anywhere, at home, at school, at the park, or at Gettysburg National Military Park. It uses GPS to help guide you through your journey to see the stories and events unfold at the exact location where they occurred. So go into your phone's app store and get it now for free. That's Gettysburg, A Nation Divided.
Are you planning on spending some time in Gettysburg soon? Well, you should. So check out GettysburgBattlefieldTours.com as your source for things to do. Tickets are available for exclusive experiences such as the Sunset Double-Decker Battlefield Tour, Adams County Port Tour Shuttle, and Discoveries Beyond Gettysburg. For details, follow them on Facebook or visit GettysburgBattlefieldTours.com.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
All right, and we're back now. We're going to take our questions from our patrons. Don't forget, if you want to ask a question on Ask a Gettysburg Guide, you got to become a patron over at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. And real quick, before we get to this, I would like to thank Roy Mead, one of our patrons, and he says, Matt and Eric, keep up the great work. And he got this microphone for us here off of the wish list. So thank you very much for that, Roy. That's going to come in handy as we get out into the field if it ever stops raining. Oh, no, what am I talking about? We've had beautiful weather. It's just raining today, but I was hoping that we would actually get to do this out in the field. But Mother Nature did not agree. So anyway, thank you, Roy Mead, and let's move along to Charles Fuller's question now. I'm curious as to how the artillery coordination worked at the division level. For example, on day one, when Heath's division first deployed for battle, did division commanders like Heath have their own specialized senior artillery officer to coordinate overall division artillery deployment? How hands-on were most division commanders in placing individual batteries, etc., regardless of what the formal guidelines were?
The answer to that is yes. Okay. So it's complicated.
Okay.
And I'll try to go through it for you. So let's talk about Heath. Heath belongs to AP Hill, 3rd Corps, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So 5 battalions of artillery within the 3rd Corps. Mm-hmm. Heath has his own battalion. He's under a guy named Lieutenant Colonel John J. Garnett. Okay. Yeah. I know there's a lot of Garnets. He's not the guy that gets killed at Camp
Right.
Charge.
Different Garnet.
Different Garnet. Garnet's an interesting guy. There's not a whole lot written on him. I'll give you my interpretation based on my research. He's a West Pointer. He's a classmate of Cushing's. Okay. Obviously doesn't graduate in 61. He leaves and goes over to the Confederacy. He goes to the Washington Artillery, premier militia organization, and becomes a lieutenant in the Washington Artillery. He ends up being direct support to Dick Anderson, working for Longstreet. Longstreet loves this guy, loves him. He goes from lieutenant to lieutenant colonel. So, is Garnet competent? Well, he's a West Pointer. He's in the premier organization. Longstreet loves him, and he makes it all the way to lieutenant colonel, which I would think that means he's probably a competent, capable guy.
Right. Someone thinks he's competent.
Somebody thinks he's competent, capable. But I get the distinct impression that Pendleton doesn't like him. Okay, so we got some weird stuff going on with Confederate artillery in the 3rd Corps on the first day. The the Corps artillery commander is a guy named Lindsey Walker, who is a competent, capable guy. For some reason, he's going to send the 2 reserve artillery battalions forward in the front of the march, Pegram and McIntosh, and they're the ones that are going to set up on Harris Ridge.
Those are the reserves, you said?
They're the reserve. So he's sending the reserve forward, and Heath's guy, Garnet, is placed in reserve. The look on your face was the look on my face when I realized this. It's like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And all I can think of is it's an issue of ammunition expenditure, that they're letting the reserve guys fire up their stuff first, and then they're letting letting the straight up infantry artillery hold their ammunition for the fight.
Right.
Because they think they're just fighting militia, remember?
Right.
Dem stare black-headed fellers tain't no militia. So the whole time they're going into action, I think they're just fighting against militia. They're just letting the reserve guys handle it. So,
I mean, is it like a friend of mine was in the Navy, and he said that when he was on deployment, they spent most of the time just shooting old ammunition into the sea. Like, was it for that reason that it would expire soon?
No, I don't think it's that. I think it comes down to the Confederates only have so much ammunition.
Okay.
And when you say somebody's in reserve, it's because we have only got so much ammunition.
And they didn't rotate who's in reserve and who's attached to a division like they would do the order of march or something.
Maybe on the order of march they might do that, but I'm not quite sure why they're doing it. I mean, all you can do is speculate, because there's nothing in the accounts that I've been able to find to explain why they did it.
Right.
Now, of course, Willie Pegram's got a great reputation.
Sure.
I mean, he's one of the rising stars of Confederate artillery. So, if anybody can make it happen, it's going to be Willie Pegram.
Now, wait, is it his whole battalion that's leading Heath's column, or is it just the Fredericksburg artillery that's leading the column from his battalion, and then the rest of the battalion's a little further back?
I don't think they're leading the whole way, because remember when Marcellus Jones fires the first shot at 7:15, he's not shooting at artillery.
No.
He's shooting at Alabama guys.
From what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, they're leading the whole way until it's time to pass through their own skirmish line.
I think that's probably
okay.
I think that's probably
and then
correct.
the infantry goes up ahead.
You're not going to lead with artillery.
No, that's ridiculous.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But so, does Heath have his own guy? Yeah. Well, what does the artillery battalion commander do? Well, he's supposed to be in the commander's hip pocket and talking to the commander and listening to the conversations and seeing what the commander can see. And that way, when they decide to go into action, then he gets to do terrain management. And he gets to say, okay, boss, I'm going to put my guns here, and you're not going to put infantry here, because we can't occupy the same spot at the same time. So, but if I'm doing that, I'm not micromanaging my batteries. So you would think that a good battalion commander is forward with his division commander, listening to what's going on, getting a feel for what the fight's going to look like, and then once the boss commits and makes a decision, then I'm going to run back and bring my batteries up.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Because one thing we say in the military all the time is time spent in reconnaissance is never wasted.
Yes.
Which means if you got nothing better to do, you need to be out looking at the ground. My platoon sergeant used to say, Lieutenant, time spent in reconnaissance is never wasted, which is his subtle way of saying, go away and leave me alone. So to further complicate things, Pendleton fires Garnet on the morning of July 1st.
Right. Okay. I remember this now. Yeah.
And Garnet won't leave. he won't go. He won't leave. He stays there. Now, just last week, I found out that Garnet's brother was killed at Chancellorsville.
Oh, okay.
So does that have an impact? I don't know. But if I was distraught that my brother was killed, I don't think I'd get fired for it.
Right. Right.
I think you might, put me on the shelf someplace for a while until I got over it. But
Yeah. Maybe he didn't like him before his brother got killed.
I think that's the case. And come out on the battle walk, and we'll go into and come into reasons why I think deep down.
Nice tease.
Pendleton has it in for this guy.
Good. Okay.
So,
all right.
Okay.
Uh-huh. All right. So the next one here is Timothy Dolan. He says, Wainwright complains a lot about not being able to get good horses in the Army of the Potomac's First Corps. Did they suffer from chronic shortages in the Reb artillery too? And if so, did they do anything special to alleviate it? Are there any good books focusing on the Confederate artillery, specifically at Gettysburg?
We don't call them Reb artillery. We call them Confederate artillery. Without praise or censure.
Right.
Does Wainwright have a problem with horses? Yes. Does everybody have a problem with horses? Yes. Everybody has a problem with horses. The difference is that the Yankees have all the horses in the world because they have government contracting, and they buy up every single horse and bring them forward. I think I can't remember the exact number, but I think the Union have like a standing requisition of like 3,000 horses a day. Just keep bringing them forward until I tell you to stop.
That's insane.
So
Jeez.
Confederates don't have that.
No.
Okay? So how do the Confederates deal with the lack of horses? Well, the biggest way that they deal with the lack of horses is by stealing every single horse they can find. And on top of it, General Lee, after the Peninsula Campaign, makes the conscious decision to stop making more artillery.
Interesting.
Let's not create any new artillery formations because we don't have enough horses to pull the guns that we have today.
So let's use what we have.
Let's use what we have.
Make the best of it.
And if we can get better guns, like let's trade in some 6-pounders and get 12-pounders, I'd rather have my weak 6 horses pull a 12-pounder than a 6-pounder, because it's going to be a better gun in the fight. But that's basically what they're doing. What is a good reference? To my knowledge, the only reference that I've been able to find about Confederate artillery at Gettysburg is Gottfried's book.
Yep. That's what I was going to say.
And
I just started reading that, actually.
Gottfried's book is a distillation of Long Arm of Lee.
Okay.
In essence. That was my perception. And it's a good book. It's both blue and gray. So you just want to hear about Confederates, just read half the book.
Yeah.
But
Jeff just took a tour with Gottfried.
I went to Antietam, bought the book. I asked the lady, I'm like, do you have a paperback version by this? He goes like, well, no, the hardcover is good because it's autographed. And wouldn't you know, today's your lucky day. He's also going to be your guide. And I'm like, no way. And I'll tell you, it was a tremendous experience. And to think for a guy who kind of started his career, or at least from what I understand, doing Gettysburg stuff, to just see that passion for Antietam, I mean, well worth it if you guys have a chance to get down there.
There you go. There's a little shout out to Brad Gottfried there.
All right.
All right, let's see now. Next person is Brian Derenick. He says,
Well, hang on. We got Roy Mead. Let's go Roy Mead question.
You want to skip to Roy? Okay.
Because it's the same as the last question, pretty much.
Okay, Roy Mead says, my question for Rob is, what was the hardest thing a commander had to replace after a campaign? Was it men, horses, equipment, etc.?
Horses. It's horses.
It's always horses.
I mean...
Is it because horses are living things? Is that what it is? They die?
Well, the problem is it takes a long time to create a military horse. I mean, first you got to get a mommy horse and a daddy horse. And when they love each other really well, 11 months later, you're going to get a baby horse. And the baby horse is going to spend its first year or two trying to kill itself.
Right.
And then eventually it's going to be old enough that you can start to train it.
Right.
But
that's not for like 4 years.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
the Confederacy especially does not have 4 years, as they'll find out in 4 years.
Why does Union cavalry suck? Because everybody thought the war was going to be over in 3 months, and nobody wanted to put any effort into making good Union cavalry. And by the time they realized that, oh wow, this is going to last a long time, then I'm back to mommy horse and daddy horse. I mean, it's going to take a long time to make good, competent cavalry. So, because in cavalry, the horse and the rider have to bond. I mean, they've got to have a relationship. They got to know each other. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's slightly different with an artillery horse. I'm just putting them in the traces and slapping them in and maybe condition them, but it's just not that easy. And
well, they're getting diseases just like the men are.
Oh, absolutely. So they're absolutely dying of diseases.
Yeah, dying of disease. They're being worn out. They're being ridden to death.
They're being wounded.
They're being wounded. Killed. They're being killed.
They're being malnourished. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, because they're malnourished, they're being mistreated, and they're dying. I mean, what kind of struck me was getting ready for this tour, I went through and read all the official record after-action reports for all the battery commanders, the Confederate battery commanders. Every single one is complaining that the horses are just dying. I mean, on the retreat, coming out, like in the pouring rain for 10 days, you haven't fed this horse, and now you got this torrential downpour where they can't eat, and they're losing so many horses, the Confederates have guns captured that they can't pull off.
Oh, wow.
So, and they lose like half their forges, and they start to have to prioritize what I'm going to tow out of here. So, horses. I had to say I can always get more men, but I can't always get more horses.
Right.
And horses come in different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
I mean, usually it's the little horses on the cavalry, and then the bigger horses, the draft horses, towing artillery and supply wagons.
Right.
Can you use mules? No. Mules are temperamental. They're smart.
Right.
Mules are really smart. They don't want to die.
Right. They're not going to go towards that melee.
So are there horses in the artillery? Are there mules in the artillery? I can't rule it out, but as a rule, they don't use mules.
But what? Go ahead, Jeff.
It's just interesting to think that, and I don't know if the railroad is so far along by the 1860s that there'd be, this might be naive of me, a shortage of horses for sale in the 1860s of all decades and centuries. Like, I mean, aren't a lot of people consuming horses?
But you need horses
in commerce?
For farms.
Yeah.
And when I take a horse from a farmer, that means he's going to starve because I got nobody to pull the plow.
So this is more like people are like breeding their own horses. This is self-sustaining agricultural economy.
And that's great until Jenkins rolls through and takes all my horses.
Right.
Or Beckham comes through and takes all my horses. This is why this is such a big deal, because the military needs them and the civilians need them, and the U.S. government is just writing these big fat checks and just buying every single horse they can find and put them in these remount depots and shipping them to the front. Because I got to take care of the horses. I have to have veterinarians. I've got to feed them. I got to shoe them. I got to all kind of stuff.
It's ridiculous the amount of food needed just for a single horse, and the Army's got tens of thousands of them. it's really amazing that they were able to field these armies. Okay. Now, Brian, are you ready for
Sure,
Brian
yeah,
now?
yeah.
Okay. Brian Darenick says, were there any Confederate artillery officers aside from E.P. Alexander who performed at a high level during the Battle of Gettysburg and saw their star rise and lead to a larger leadership role through the remainder of the war?
No. So, I mean,
I like your simple answers.
simple is better. The only one guy, there's only one guy that gets a star that I've been able to find, and his name is Lindsey Walker. And Lindsey Walker is the 3rd Corps artillery chief. Walker's a good guy. He's a competent guy. He served with A.P. Hill from the beginning, and he stays with A.P. Hill all through the war and ends up as his artillery chief. He's huge. He's, 6'4", which, 6'4". When the average guy is like 5'7", 6'4" is pretty tall.
Yeah.
And Walker leads a charmed life because despite the fact that he's so super tall, he never gets wounded.
Interesting.
And he's on all the reconnaissance. I mean, good artillerymen, artillery officers are out trying to pick the ground for the guns, and Walker's out there all the time. In fact, his counterpart, let me just check my notes, but go ahead. I want to make sure I get this right because one of them gets capped. And
Counterpart in which?
oh, well, there's 3 Corps artillery chiefs.
Yeah, so which
And
corps?
J. Thompson Brown is with 2nd Corps. And, Walker survives the war. J. Thompson Brown ends up getting killed in 1964 while doing a reconnaissance.
Okay.
I mean, the 2nd Corps artillery chief, he gets, after Gettysburg, he gets unseated by Long, and he goes back to being a battalion commander, and he'll be out forward doing a recon, and he'll get shot during the Wilderness campaign. I think it's Wilderness campaign, and he'll get killed because, when you go out and do reconnaissance,
That's what happens.
you get shot, like
Yeah,
Jackson.
like Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, like Jackson.
Yeah.
So, but that's Lindsey Walker, and
A little lower, a little lower.
little lower,
A little that way.
a little that way.
There you go. Okay.
All right, good,
There-
good.
Yeah,
good.
there he is. Yep.
So he seems like a very competent guy, civil engineer. Although he's a VMI grad and I'm a Citadel grad, so we're rivals, and I'm supposed to bust on him. But he's a good guy. So
Just adjust that mic there because you knocked it away from your mouth. Yeah.
So Walker makes general in February of 1965, but stays with Hill. So it's not like he's getting any more responsibility. He's just gets a star.
Okay.
So, Beckham, the horse artillery guy, he's mortally wounded at Franklin. J. Thompson Brown's killed. Pegram is killed at Five Forks. McIntosh, one of the reserve battalion commanders, he's wounded twice more. That puts him out of the fight. And Walton, the commander of 1st Corps Artillery, resigns when he gets superseded by
Alexander.
And I thought we were going to make it all the way through this interview without mentioning
him.
Without mentioning him.
Well, we won't go any further because people need to go on the tour for that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now I think we're up to Facebook questions, and there are quite a few of them.
Uh-oh.
We'll start with Bobby Crystal. He says, "Is there a reason why the Confederates didn't use any of their canister during the Battle of Gettysburg?"
They do.
Oh.
They do. If you go on the Ralph Siegel Gunfight in the Peach Orchard tour, you will hear that they are trading canister. Mostly it's Brooks Battery. 1st Corps is firing canister back and forth with Ames in the Peach Orchard. So the main reason is they don't get close enough.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Peach Orchard fight is close enough that you can use canister at extreme range. But the problem with canister at that range is it spreads out so much that it isn't really as effective.
Right.
As effective.
So they're just basically sending a bunch of balls in the air and hope that they fall somewhere.
Right.
Okay. Barbara Schultz, she says, "I never knew much about artillery. Very interesting. Were there problems keeping powder bags, fuses, etc. dry during heavy rains?"
Yes, absolutely. And it's a problem keeping them from blowing up, too. So
That happened a lot?
well, in order to store this stuff, it has to be stored in a very deliberate manner. If you look at an ammo box, you see there's kind of like honeycombs in there, and because you're rattling this stuff around in extreme temperatures, and if you're sloppy and you're storing fuses in with the powder, and this stuff bangs around, you're going to have problems.
Okay.
So does it get wet? Yeah, absolutely, it gets wet, and this is why they've got tarps. They've got huge tarps in the battery wagons so they can hold the tarps up and then work underneath the tarps.
Yeah.
Doing that.
Okay.
But that's a good question.
All right. Mike Lentz, old 6 questions. Lentz only has, looks like 2 questions here today. He says, I am late to the party, but why did they not make the cannons in their batteries uniform? I was going to ask you this before. All rifled or all smoothbore? How were cannons allocated to the batteries? Who would make that decision? I'm sorry, there were 3 questions there. So, so why were the Confederate batteries not uniform in the types of guns that they had?
That's an excellent question. You need to come on the tour on 22 September. The short answer to your question is, when you've only got a battery, if that's all you have is one battery, you want a mix. You want short-range and long-range guns. If you read the John Gibbon artillery manual that he wrote prior to the war, it specifies you want short and long-range guns in the battery.
So they're doing it more according to the United States.
That's correct.
Doctrine.
Because that doctrine's written for, like, Mexican War, independent operations, small numbers of troops.
Right.
But let's fast forward a couple years, and now I got tens and hundreds of thousands of troops, then it makes more sense to specialize.
Yeah. Okay.
But I guess the bottom line is we just don't want to. It's always been this way. I don't want to change it.
Now, I heard once that there was also an element of maybe pride because some of these guns were captured and brought into the battery. That's true?
Yeah, my wife calls it stupid guy thing.
Yeah. She's right.
Mine. It's mine.
That's exactly right. It's true. It's true. We are dumb sometimes. Okay. Richard Snyder. He says, in regards to Gettysburg, were there any soldiers positioned at various spots to try and access the damage the Confederate artillery was inflicting? I've got to think that the artillerists couldn't see much because of the smoke.
They're always trying to see damage. They're always, in the military today, we call that BDA, battle damage assessment. And so the artillerymen tend to have the better field glasses. Like optics, to be able to look through the smoke and to see what you're shooting at. Both sides are trying to assess damage. The Union have pretty strict rules about not doing counter battery. They don't shoot at Confederate guns. The only time they're allowed to shoot at Confederate guns is when Confederate guns are being especially effective. So, because if a Confederate gun is on target and killing the Union guns, we'll let you shoot at that one. But if the Confederates are just missing, leave them alone. I think we talked about one of our rules in the military is never interrupt the enemy when they're making a mistake.
Yes, okay.
And if they're actively wasting their ammunition, let them.
Right.
So the Union is very strict on not doing counter battery unless for certain circumstances. Confederates, not quite as strict.
They'll just fire at anything.
Well, that all depends on the individual commander. It all depends on the individual discipline. When we do the battlefield tour, we'll walk out there and we'll look at some cases where guys are just wasting ammunition, and we'll look at cases where Confederate commanders are like, no, stop shooting. So,
okay. That's it. That's the last question from the live audience. So thank you everybody for that. And that's about it. Jeff, you got a question for Rob while we're here? You okay?
I'm good.
All right. Eric, you got one?
Oh, no, I'm fine. Thank you.
Eric's fine. Thank you. And that's it. Rob, thank you very much for coming on doing this. Ladies and now, in the notes that you sent here, you wrote September 26th. But
did I?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's the 22nd.
Hang.
Let's look at the calendar. It's a Sunday, you say?
Yeah, it's a Sunday.
All right, hold on. I'll just pull up the calendar real quick here. Get to September, and the 26th is a Sunday, not the 22nd.
I stand corrected. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
all
It's
right.
Sunday the 26th.
Because the 22nd is a Wednesday. So, yeah, Sunday the 26th, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure that you mark that in your calendars. What time does that start?
It will start at 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
And if you want to attend these battle walks, go to our website, ALBG, Association of Licensed Battlefield Guides. You have to pay online. The park will not allow us to do walk-ins. So
So you have to register. You have to sign up.
Register online.
You have to pay.
And pay prior.
How much is it?
I think it's
35.
35.
35.
Yeah.
35 per person.
And you get a sexy handout.
Oh,
You get really nice handouts.
what's the handout? Is that you have to see? You have to go and see?
Well, when you do a battle walk, most guides will give out a really good handout with a bunch of maps and diagrams and things like that. I think my handout is like 5 pages front and back, 2 slides per page, and you're going to get biographical profiles on all the commanders, and you're going to get some of the maps and some of the diagrams.
But yours is sexy.
Oh, mine's absolutely sexy.
Okay, good. All right, very good. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to this. Don't forget, if you want to send in questions on our Ask a Guide, you got to become a patron over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. Otherwise, thank you all and take care. All right. We are done
I
there.
said anything factually incorrect.
Oh, well, we'll find
I'll
out.
know later when I get the hate mail.
Fact checkers, I'll tell you. Independent.
Need a Corps badge or other insignia for your uniform? Then check out the Badge Maker. Here's what some of his satisfied customers had to say. Miranda said, I ordered an identification disc from Joe and it's fantastic. He hand stamped it exactly as I wanted. It has a great rough on-campaign feel to it and was reasonably priced to boot. Greg said, my unit has purchased from him in the past quality badges and good service. And Jerry S. says, the Badge Maker is the go-to place for accurate replica Civil War badges. Visit CivilWarCorpsBadges.com and attach a message with your order saying you heard about him on Addressing Gettysburg.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, forsooth 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the mail. No man forget shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the mail. No man forget shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory.